to see you again. This is
Hello.
Will from System Support, and today we're going to be talking about setting up IT for hiring remote rock stars. So, I wanted to go over this because it's pretty timely with all the different personnel changes in tech these days, and wanted to, I think this was something timely, even though even having COVID in the past, that there's still a lot of things we can do to set up the office for being ready to take remote rock stars in.
Mm.
So today I'm going to go over the why now isn't this old news, like I just mentioned, how to help people get their work done, and then how do you cap the downside? Because I know for a lot of people, working with remote users can be a little nerve-wracking for, how do you make sure that they're being productive? So why now? Why bring this webinar up here in February of 2024? Well, COVID was just the beginning. COVID kind of forced everybody's hands all at once to say that they have to start working at home. And for a lot of companies, all at once, they had to make this pivot just to keep everything moving, keep the doors open and keep going. So that kind of just got us started. But especially now, we're seeing a lot of challenges in the labor force with, there are companies like Microsoft, Meta, who runs Facebook, Amazon are doing major tech layoffs for um, their companies, and the Fortune 500 is hanging on to a need to put butts in seats in the office and doing this huge push for return to the office for productivity. And for a lot of people who over the past 4 years or so have really changed their lives and lifestyles around being able to work from home, be it childcare or anything like that, that talent gets freed up to be able to use in your own business where, you might not be able to put all small businesses might not have all the same perks and attraction that, a very large Fortune 500 company would have, but it gives the small business portion a major concession to be really attractive. And then another major piece too is managing the salary cap. Here in Massachusetts, especially the eastern side, cost of living is extremely high. And you can kind of manage some of those salaries and costs of the labor force by being able to utilize remote workers, even
Mm.
here within the United States. So for remote tools, the good news is we're pretty much used to it. COVID forced the work at home issue, showed that a lot of companies can do it, were able to do it, got it done. Um, for a lot of companies, the tools were already in place. For organizations, it just needed some adjusting here and there. And, maybe a couple tweaks here, a couple tweaks there, an update there. The overwhelming bulk of modern work is on a
Mm.
computer and on a smartphone. And the other good news about the digital world, as opposed to, paper or kind of in person, those key performance indicators of people actually getting stuff done is very easy to track in the digital world once you know what those are. So chances are the infrastructure is already there. They're already working on a computer. You just have to tweak a few things to make sure that computer
Mm.
can be somewhere else. And another key part too, beyond things kind of already being used to it, is you can get some all-star contracts at a drafty salary. So I mentioned before the major tech layoffs, you know, getting laid off from Microsoft might not necessarily be a knock on a prospective employee's performance. It might
Mm.
just be a leadership blunder from Microsoft. I have a friend who works at a Microsoft company, and they mentioned that they saw that Meta was hiring a bunch of
Mm.
engineers. So Microsoft rushed and hired a bunch of people too, simply because this other company was doing it. So there was a huge push just to grab talent for the sake of it. And, if you bring them in, it's not really a right size or right fit. You got to, at some point, to make sure you do what you're supposed to do for the shareholders, you have to let them go. Um, so that, again, those major tech layoffs can be an opportunity for small businesses. The other piece too for all stars that you can get is mother's hours. You know, it offers a huge opportunity, and there are a ton of incredibly talented people out there that have a new obligation as a new parent, want to stay home, take care of their child, so they can't work a classic 9 to 5 or 8 to 6, and you need to be able to have some flexibility at home to take care of a few tasks. So while the URL is a little interesting, hiremymom.com is a great example of getting incredible talent at different hours. And Noah Kagan told a story on a Tim Ferriss show podcast of getting an executive assistant from the Dallas Stars from the website. So, I mean, talk about an all-star
Mm.
employee that you got for somebody who just needed to change a pace.
Mm.
And then especially too, you also have the international talent. So, you know, we personally here utilize the Philippines for some non-client facing work, and we've been amazed by the quality of work, communication, and language skills. They're incredible. People we've worked with in the Philippines have been incredibly technically adept. They use tools that are available to them. A great example is in communicating through email. They use ChatGPT a ton to make sure that, you know, the language makes sense and helps a lot for, you know, coming across clear, coming across concise, and fixing any grammar errors.
Mm.
I also wanted to give a shout out to one of my partners, Eric Lutz of MDCom. He's done a lot for unified communication systems, you know, getting phone systems instead of the phone on the desk, you know, being able to improve that work at home. And something he's seen a lot, he passed this graphic on along to me from buffer.com about, you know, why people are really driving towards that work remotely. And you can see overwhelmingly for 60% of the responses is flexible schedule, working from anywhere, not having to commute. So it's really putting more time back into people's days, and really hitting home at that cost of living portion. So as far as the why now, work from home's really here to stay. It's kind of expected after the whole COVID thing.
Mm.
And there's some fantastic opportunity for grabbing talent if you know where to look in the right places. So with that, let's move into the how do you help people be successful? So I'll tell you a dirty little secret about remote employees, and especially something that I've learned as well, is that remote workers are going to expose very quickly how well set up your company is for onboarding employees. So, do you have the policies and procedures in place to train someone on how to do something? Because, yeah, sure, um, you know, it's definitely a drag if someone is here in the office and they're watching trading videos for 8 hours a day for 3 weeks. And, there's some pieces for making sure that, um, they kind of overhear and they go to a couple different places to learn how things are done. But it's important that you have training materials, and for the training materials, that if you do something on the fly, that you have some form of recording for them to go back and reference. Because, if you're showing them a 25, 30 step process for getting something done, they're going to want to have a reference material beyond some
Mm.
notes of like, all right, where did they click? What menu was supposed to come up?
Yeah.
Um, so really remote workers, even if you just hire one just to test your internal business processes, I highly recommend it. Because especially too, for that type of person, are you clear in what's expected of them? Is the expectation just show up, sit down from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and that's kind of it? Are you expecting certain reports at a certain time? It really hones down to clear, concise communication with someone who's not in the office. And that concise communication continues to your key performance indicators, those KPIs. For a remote worker, what does success look like for them?
Mm.
Are they, for example, for us, for our remote people, it's tickets. Hey, how many tickets are you working a day? Does success look like if there's a phone call, it only rings 2 or 3 times when you see that phone call? Um, Being really clear what success looks like and having a scorecard to measure against. And then also in that same vein, are the procedures and processes you have in place clear enough that somebody doesn't need to be micromanaged for constant coaching? And maybe if you do something complicated, you have to
Mm.
do that in the beginning for, getting them up to speed, for, hey, this simple thing really has like 80 steps, and it really does need somebody for like, oh, don't forget about this, don't forget about that. But again, the nice part of doing it remote, you have a session like Zoom, you record it, and you have, a much better ability to be able to see what's going on. And whether your business is in person or remote, the processes help the people succeed because they know what they're supposed to do. If they get overwhelmed, they still have something they can refer back to, and it's the same consistent performance each time. So let's say that for the processes, you've got that locked in. Your business is already set up E-Myth style. So, all the things are documented. You have the Acme Corporation way. You're doing what you're supposed to do. Now, how do you get the IT right? So, the IT world isn't really aware of the physical. It's pretty much only the things that you type and give into it. It doesn't see the person that's sitting in front of the computer. Only what you tell it is in front of the computer. And everything these days, too, especially if you want to have the IT set up to be most remote first, drive everything towards a website login. And the big reasons for this that I'll hint and explain a little bit more down the road is ease of access for people, that whole work from anywhere, work from home, co-working space, etc., and hardware agnostic, which helps cut down on the overhead for a company for having to manage things. And then at the end of the day, what you're really looking for the office is it's a place to store desks rather than a place to store information, that you have the things you need to do, the things you need to take care of and complete. It's not like, oh, shoot, I left that on my desk. It's already in a system that you can just log in and see from anywhere. So why websites? Chances are it's pretty obvious to most people, but bears repeating, right? You don't have to worry about where the information lives. It's in a given URL. Usually somebody's providing some type of service for you to be able to access it, whether it's a professional services automation like for us, which is something like tickets, could be professional services automation, something like Salesforce for moving through how you're supposed to onboard a new client. Website portions are really great for this. And then you don't have to manage the employees' machines. Really all they need is the ability to get onto the web. So you don't have to really nail down too fine of a point on them being able to get the work done. There's some considerations there with security. You'll want to make sure whatever machine they're accessing from can't just sit there and take screenshots. But that really applies if you are working with some type of protected information, social security numbers, banking numbers, health information. In those scenarios, you do need to have some type of managed machine, really just to make sure that effectively nobody is sitting over somebody's shoulder in the cyber world taking pictures. But for everybody else, another nice part too is there's less excuses for things to go wrong. Either the internet works or it doesn't. The website is up or it isn't. And the other piece for it too is it's easy to track activity. If within the website, there are always logs and you can see what people are doing, see if they're getting the work done for you.
Yeah, I know. I get that monthly report on our
Some business
website.
systems to send to the cloud to think about. A big one is phones. A lot of companies still, it's not all email. Picking up the phone and calling is a great thing. And you really don't want somebody using their personal cell phone for it either, because then that person's phone number kind of owns the relationship. And if it's some type of service and that person goes somewhere else, the client will be calling their personal line instead of your corporate line. So having, look for unified communications as a service, UCaaS, and those services can also do texting, which is huge as well. So that gives you, the business owner, an insight into, what are people saying, what kind of calls are coming in and out, and it also helps you own that client relationship. You also want to send general company documents to the cloud, something like SharePoint, Dropbox, Google Drive. That way people have access to the letterhead, standard policies and procedures wherever they may go. You'll want to have some type of task tracking, especially for the who's doing what today. And that's stuff like tickets, Monday.com, Asana, or full-blown customer relationship management systems or CRMs like Salesforce or HubSpot. And a must-have too is video conferencing, something like this for Zoom, where you can record what you're doing. So that way you can, hey, let me show you how to do something, hit record, go through the recording. Somebody has a link to that file to be able to reference later. So touching base on phones a little bit more, ask your telecom provider about if they have an option for cloud phones, being able to see if there's something that can just run on the cell phone as opposed to, having to have the desk phone for transferring things, or even an app that runs on the computer and you just plug a headset in and go from there. Internally, we use a program called Elevate. It allows us to easily move phone numbers around, makes our cell phones act as an extension of the desk phone. We can text, we can even have text messages that everybody in the company can see. And rather than have this be some type of advertisement for Elevate or something, it's really just, it allows us for no matter where we are, snow days, here in the office or whatever, we can keep control of the way we connect with the clients. And especially too, somebody's out sick, another person can pick up and carry on with whatever is needed. But one big piece for recordings, just a warning for the state of Massachusetts. Massachusetts is a two-party recording state. So if you call us, you hear me ramble on about calls may be recorded for quality assurance. So just as a warning. So that's one good thing to be aware of for Massachusetts. Another piece too, company documents. You'll want to make sure that people have access to the important things, how-to documents, letterhead, fillable forms, pretty consistent, easy things that, maybe you typically have a checklist or something here in the office. You'll want to digitize those. And just as a pro tip, keep a backup of those files in case of issues. If you have a shared one, somebody accidentally deletes something or something, you want to make sure that you can get another copy of it quickly. But chances are you already have a SharePoint or a Google Drive. It just needs a formal setup.
Yeah, and also on that, like, it's good to
Video
keep things
conferencing, Microsoft Teams comes with Business Standard. I think it even comes with Business Basic. So you can take the recordings of those. You just have to remember to turn off the expiration of the call recordings and make sure you hit recording when you start one of those meetings. And usually those meetings have to be something that's scheduled just as a heads up for Teams. And I know Zoom has some pretty similar options as well. And it's very easy to make recordings for how-tos. I use it personally extensively for starting a screen share, captures the screen in my voice. So that way a whole process and questions can be captured on video. And I have done this a ton with our counterparts in the Philippines for how do you set up a security incident and event management system and how do you connect all these pieces? And I would even recommend doing this without remote workers because it's so much easier to just do their task and record it rather than rewrite a 50,000 page document for a how-to manual. So video and voice are fantastic multimedia for training somebody how to do something. And again, Zoom and Google Meetup can do the same thing. Task tracking is the other big one. This is probably where a lot of companies start to get a little anxious. They might use their email system as a, hey, email is how I know that my employees are doing something. But you want something that has some type of something that you're tracking, right? So for us here in the IT world, we use a ticketing system. So much of our work tracking is the ticket. Who has what, the communication to the client, all the information is right there. So if you're not in something that's heavy service-based, where a ticketing system would make sense, you're going to want to look at something that might be a little more project management, other type of work tracking pieces. And some examples are Asana, which has a free version up to, I think, 2-3 users, which is great to get started. Basecamp is another good one. Trello. And I know Monday.com has been running a lot of advertisements, and from the people I've spoken to who use it, I've heard great things. So those sites do a great job of capturing who, what, where, when, and that really helps kind of relieve some of the anxiety of, who's doing what. But one major piece to consider as well is you have to feed the beast. So you have to, those informations aren't going to pull a lot of things automatically. It'll be really interesting down the road to see if somebody does, punch something in for AI, ChatGPT to start automating some of the pieces of performing different pieces. But I think overall, you have to feed the beast. You have to put the information in of I did the thing, and it really comes to the managers to make sure that the beast is fed. Hey, I see no updates on Monday.com. What the hell did you do
Mm,
all day?
mm, yeah.
Saying that this serves as the record of you actually doing something. It's kind of moving away from the, hey, punching the clock, and seeing
Yeah.
the task-based performance pieces as the condition of your employment, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. And I think that
Let's go ahead and
does.
move on to limiting the downside.
Mhm.
So a big part that I hear from a lot of business owners is the fear of the unseen. Are they actually working? How do I make sure they're not just at home on Netflix? That they say that, or the dreaded, they have something that moves the mouse every once in a while to show that they're active. Um, what if I give them a piece of hardware? What if I do have one of those sensitive information is part of my business line, and I give them I need to make sure that, I give them a piece of hardware. What if they don't give it back? What happens? How do I know they're starting on time? How do I make sure that they're having the same level of communication and collaboration in the office? How can I make sure they're still a part of the team? And what about legal issues? Hey, if there's a whole bunch of stuff for OSHA for people getting hurt in the office. Does that apply if they're within their own home? Um, and for that, I want to give a shout out to Helene Horn Figman um,
Test.
for some notes about workers' comp. She's a fantastic HR attorney out of Stoughton. And when I told her about this upcoming webinar, she shot me a few notes. So one thing is, workers' comp does extend to some of the work at home pieces. So it's something to consider for work at home employees. And if you have some questions about that, I definitely encourage you to reach out to Helene for answering any further questions about it, because my area of expertise is the IT side. So on the opposite, I'll leave the workers' comp to the workers' comp experts. But with that, getting back into the IT, are they actually working? And overwhelmingly, this is the biggest concern we hear. And there are a varieties of ways to address this concern, ranging from just an internal process to some pretty like big brother stuff. Um, so if you have clear understanding and communication with your employees around expected response times to, different methods of communications, like, hey, if I chat you and it doesn't show as busy because you got something on your calendar, I expect you to chat me back within a couple seconds. Um, hey, if I call you, I expect to call back within a couple minutes, even if you are in a meeting or something like that. And of course, if you call in a meeting, you send the message, whatever. Or even like, a email, I understand that's batched, take your time with it. And then the other piece too, when should tasks and projects be completed? What does completed look like? What does the reporting for it look like? If they're supposed to check on something or update something, is there a KPI sheet or something on Monday.com that's updated every day? And if that thing isn't updated, like technically you didn't work today, and we have to talk about that. So those are the process pieces, which honestly is a lot, it's really not that different from working in the office.
Mm.
And then there's the big brother pieces of, kind of lurking in the shadows. Um, you can check audit logs of platforms like Microsoft and Google to see emails sent, documents modified, all the different activity within a 365 suite. Um, it's kind of tough to see on the endpoint from just audit logs, but you can use a program like ActiveTrack, which does a lot of screenshots and real-time productivity information, like what screens were they on, when was the screen last active? I mean, ActiveTrack can get very granular as to what an employee is doing at a given time. Um, but again, that would be in really like low trust situations for ActiveTrack. And it might be that, hey, you start with the process and elevate to ActiveTrack when the time comes. The other big concern that I hear about that I gave them a laptop, if you provide the hardware, you have to support it. Hardware maintenance, shipping replacements, troubleshooting, and more can get very costly. Hey, I have somebody in Ohio, I have to ship them the laptop. It costs this much. The laptop was $1,000. There's a lot that goes into if you are providing them the hardware, what you have to take care of. And so if you want to control the hardware you bought, one pro tip as well is your IT providers remote monitoring management tool is not a panacea for complete control of a machine, because that's a program installed onto the computer. So you really can't do remote wiping. You can set up scripts to deactivate users and things like that, but that computer has to turn on, check into the internet to be able to run those things. So if you really want something for lockout, wiping, complete control of hardware, you'd want something like Microsoft Intune or Apple's mobile device management, where those devices are really locked down to a certain degree, controlling logins and really owning that hardware. Even if, an employee tries to resell the laptop or something, it's still yours, and effectively they're going to get a dud, and you'll have a method of being able to recoup it. And hey, they don't want to use a company machine. I realize that title is not really a good match for what's on here, but in some instances, if you can get away with it, have them use their own computer. If it's website work only, try and figure out like a good fit. I don't want to step on too many toes here for any HR laws or anything, but just be upfront in the interview process what requirements are. That again, that expectation is you're coming with your own hardware, and with coming with your own hardware, like don't bring a really old dinosaur laptop that barely boots up when everything you're going to be doing is web-based. It could be that, hey, here's a $500 credit towards a laptop at Best Buy. Just purchase it. It's yours. It's a hiring incentive, but if it's broken, you're going to Best Buy, not to us. And one thing too that I've seen a ton, just trying to like head off excuses or whatever, is have them do an internet speed test at home and take a screenshot of the results. And the screenshot is a good tool for checking their work at home ability, because that's going to show if they're going to be able to easily communicate when they have a problem, like, hey, here's something that I'm seeing. And the other thing too, if you don't really believe them, if they're like, oh yeah, sure, this laptop's fantastic, have them send over the serial number and model of the device. Like, hey, it's a Dell with the service tag of these letters. And that way you can see if that laptop's 2 or 3 years old and they got it for the pandemic, or that thing's been around for 8, 9 years and might not be up to snuff. Moving into some of the other pieces for making sure they feel a part of the team. The easiest way I found to make sure that you include them is scheduling intentional time with them. Some virtual office hours replace what would be water cooler talk, although I can't even think of an office I've seen that has a water cooler. So, having those kind of impromptu meetings in the hallways, just be a little more intentional about it. Recognize and reward employees in chat systems. If you already use Slack or Teams, making a channel that's just about shout outs. Internally, we use a program called Crewhoo, which it focuses on IT companies like ours, but it was originally designed for ice cream shops, for recognizing people internally and for, taking surveys of are people doing a good job. And then, sending a care package, $50 to send a box with some goodies in it is cheap money to keep like a really talented person on your team who's feeling kind of left out. It's just, instead of the relationship being a casual one that comes out of convenience, you just have to be a little more intentional about it. And I'd have to say, if there's an overall theme of everything we're talking about here today, it's really being intentional with what's expected and building that relationship. So to kind of wrap up here, as I kind of mentioned of that whole tying together statement, running the modern team really takes a different approach. You're much more intentional, even with like how you're rewarding, managing, including. It's very by the numbers, actual evidence of work done. What once was an assumption now becomes explicit statements. And, it really helps with communication with people now that you have explicit statements of what you're working with. And like I mentioned before, remote work honestly is more about management style than technology. How do you empower someone to crush it without having to stand over their shoulder? How do you know that somebody's doing a great job without sitting there behind their shoulder the whole time? So for those who want to figure out if they are ready to rock and roll for remote work, um, or just want to see if you need a tune-up, please head over to systemsupport.com/remote, grab a time on my calendar, and we'll go ahead and review your IT infrastructure. And I'll take a look at some of your processes and procedures as well of, hey, can you do these video recordings? Just kind of a quick gut check for, hey, I'm thinking about getting this type of talent. Is this going to be a good way to do it? And with that, are there any questions of anybody out there?
Can you hear me well?
Yep, we can hear you.
One question I have is about like with the remote workforce, like in terms of like network infrastructure, like you have all these computers other places, like what's the best way to have them using VPNs or that type of scenario?
Yeah, the big question there for network infrastructure is trying to make it independent of the office itself.
Mm,
So, making sure that because it's one thing if you have all the workloads that they're working on are in a machine in their own office. Oh, hey, Kevin. It's one thing if they're working on a machine in your office for being able to maintain a certain level of control.
yeah,
Hey, we deal with something that requires IP address restriction. And then in those cases, you would want to look at, because VPNing back to a specific office, where you have like a hub situation and they're coming back to your
yeah.
office, wherever, is you can run into a lot of internet speed issues.
Mm,
But looking at some of the SASE, Secure Access Service Edge solutions, provide that public IP
mm,
for um, restricted access or conditional access without really sacrificing too much internet performance. I mean, a VPN is,
mm.
if you're going from New Hampshire to New York City to wherever you need to go, you're
Yeah,
going to have a little bit of a drag. But the
yeah,
SASE prevents like, all right, I have to go from here to Plymouth.
Mm.
And the Plymouth office isn't really set up as a data center for a
yeah,
major like VPN hub.
yeah. Okay.
So secure access, secure edge is a big one for providing some of those public IPs, and then that way too, you don't have to go, hey, so and so for your home office, I need you to get a static IP,
Yeah, exactly.
and that becomes a huge headache because yeah, especially for some of the more sensitive areas now, they're going to start requiring these conditional access pieces, and how we've
Yeah.
solved that for clients that need that out of the office are those SASE VPNs, which
Okay.
is a hilarious term. A sassy VPN.
I know we have one dedicated VPN IP address so we can access certain things, but it's something that's kind of getting a little too limited.
Mm.
Well, especially too, I mean, if your internet for like a given office is meant to handle the people who are in there, and
Yeah,
the VPN comes in under whatever the bandwidth of that general pipe is, and then you have
yeah,
additional cut downs because there's probably a firewall or a
yeah,
VPN gateway involved. So yeah, it causes
yeah,
some additional issues.
yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Of course.
One point that I had was you talked about control over machines. Like we provide you with this laptop and we can remotely wipe this laptop. Is there an issue that's when they're bringing their own device? Because
Good question.
I have my phone and like we put the system. Oh, can't see my phone. We put the system support whatever on it for whatever reason. You know, is there a way just to say like all of these things are in a pack, all the system support stuff is in like one package and we can just nuke that? Or is it just like you have to destroy the phone and
No, great question. And that's where trying to keep things web-based
Mhm.
is the best option.
Mm,
Where, hey, it's this for Microsoft is a great example. So for us internally, everything's Microsoft 365 for the email, the Teams, the SharePoint, etc. Um, so for us, it would be that Ryan wins the lottery,
Mhm.
doesn't need to work here anymore. He's moving to Bermuda to enjoy his millions. Um, we would block sign in for the account and just kick the account out. So then when your phone tried to pull
Mm.
new information, it would say, oh my goodness, there's nothing here. And
mm,
then it would just take away the Microsoft 365 portions.
yeah.
Um, Yeah, there was an old email system that we used to use that did allow that remote wipe option, which we were worried that the remote wipe portion was going to nuke the whole phone. And we were like, yeah,
Yeah.
we don't need to get a nasty call that says you
Yeah.
just erased all the pictures of my child's
Yeah.
first birthday
It's like
party.
our relationship was fine before, and now I've made a disgruntled employee.
And I've hired a lawyer.
Yeah. So if for bring your own device, you want to drive as much towards web account portions as much as possible.
Yeah.
Because then they go to the website, they try and log in, womp, nothing there.
Yeah.
And that way too, if you can set things up where they can't download files or, take things out of the platform as much, that's a huge help. Especially they can't download a PDF of something. Taking screenshots is one of those, like, okay, to a certain degree, that becomes a problem of the platform itself.
Yeah.
I know that some companies will bend over backwards to set up. I think Citrix can do things where if you take a screenshot on the system, it will blank out what you have. So no screenshots actually work.
Wow.
There's a couple different options for, how crazy do you need to get for
Yeah,
locking
I
down?
imagine like some of it gets to a point where like, well, if you disable that, then it's like, well, I'm just gonna take a picture here. I use my phone, like,
Yep.
that's
Yeah,
like how
I mean,
much do you trust people?
the cell
Yeah.
phone camera piece is one of those. If you're, I mean, for my friends who worked at the national labs, yeah, they don't get to work from home.
Yeah, it's like this data, you have to be in here and you can't have that out. I know when I was at Marriott, they were like very paranoid about cell phones on the floor because like so much credit card data is going through there. But then work from home, they're like, well, we don't have any way to enforce this.
Yeah, or even guest confidentiality for Dave Chappelle checks into the hotel under John Smith or whatever,
Yeah.
So that makes sense. Yeah, it's the bring your own device portion is very tricky. And that's why if you just drive towards the web-based part, that makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, that's what we're dealing with. But everything's web-based, so I can lock people out really quickly.
And that's the other nice part is if something goes sideways, it's good night.
Turn that key and then it's all set.
Yeah.
Yeah, wait the 15 minutes for Microsoft to boot them out. So
cool. All right, thanks guys.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for joining us.
I'll see
Everybody
ya.
have a
Bye.
wonderful day and try
You
and
too.
stay warm out there.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah, good luck.
Yeah.
I'll see you. Bye.
Spring soon.